Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch by interviewing authors, discussing their books, learning about the writing process, and even, on occasion, chatting live with a panel of authors to discuss topics relevant to both readers and writers. My guest today on the Online for Authors podcast is George Sirois, author, podcast host, and audiobook narrator. Today, he is here to chat with us about audio dramas, what they are, why an author might want to consider an audio drama, and how to go about producing them. George is the author of the international best-selling young adult science fiction novel Excelsior, its 2 sequels, and the 5-part science fiction sports serial From Parts Unknown. In 2023, after directing a live performance of an audio drama adaptation of Excelsior, George became the co-founder of the Once Upon a Podcast Network, a group of podcasts meant to motivate, celebrate, educate, and even rejuvenate creatives of all kind. He is also an audiobook narrator, lending his voice to books of all genres. A New Yorker since birth, George now lives in St. Louis, Missouri, with his wife and daughter. Hello, today on Online for Authors, I'm chatting with George Sirois. He is an author and podcaster and narrator and all kinds of things when it comes to audio. Today he's going to chat with us about audio dramas. Welcome, George.
Hello. Glad to be here.
I'm so happy to have you with us today. Real quickly, before we get into audio drama, why don't you give everybody just a quick who you are, what you do, how you got to where you are today.
Oh, okay. Well, my name is George Sirois. I am an author of a young adult science fiction trilogy called Excelsior, and part 3 is currently in development. Also the author of a 5-part science fiction wrestling serial called From Parts Unknown, and both of them are with the same publisher and are in preparations for a reintroduction to the world. From Parts Unknown will be coming out in 2025, and once part 3 of the Excelsior trilogy is finished, then I'll be able to know when that entire trilogy is coming out back into the world. I've been an audiobook narrator since 2016. I've narrated over 15 different titles of various genres, fiction and nonfiction. I just did my first nonfiction last year. I've been podcasting since 2016, although I was part of a podcast earlier than that as part of a pop culture website that I was a part of for many years. And I have started up my own show in 2018, and I've had so much fun doing that. I'm almost at episode number 300. I'm just about 15 episodes away from getting there. And last year, I even started up my own podcast network with two other podcasters, and we are in the stages of getting phase 2 rolled out. So we're actually looking for new shows. So anything that is for creatives, by creatives, anything that will help creatives while also celebrating and educating them. This is definitely the place for you. And I have just had so much fun doing all of this. And last year was really kind of a very, I would say, a peak moment for me, because I was able to adapt one of my own books, the first of the Excelsior trilogy, into an audio drama. And it's been just an amazing experience. And I'm looking forward to finishing up the script to part 2 so we can just do it all over again.
Well, that sounds fantastic. So one of the things that authors, I think, understand but sometimes forget is there's so many different ways to tell a story. Right? I mean, you can tell a story. There's poetry, and there's songs, and there's short stories, and there's novels, and there's novellas, and there's plays, and there's audiobooks, and just oral storytellers that go about telling their stories. But I had never heard of audio drama until I read your bio, which is what really got me to contact you in the first place, was I wanted to find out more about this. What actually is an audio drama?
Well, basically what it is if what audio dramas are, like this is an art that goes back um um, almost a century now. It's really been just a wonderful tool, and I'm so glad that it's really coming back into fashion, because basically what it does is it allows you to just kind of close your eyes and let a full story basically unfold in front of your mind. And what it does is it has a full cast, it has sound effects, it has a musical score, and it's basically telling you the story that really the only thing that's left is visuals. And that came into play when television came around. And once television started, that's when it kind of fell out of fashion. Thankfully, the BBC has really kept it alive. And they've been keeping that art form going for many, many years up to this day. There's so many great audio dramas that have come out in recent years that really need to get more attention. A lot of people were really putting a lot of attention on the Amazon series of Good Omens, and rightfully so. Good Omens is an amazing story. However, they also did an audio drama of it, not an audio book. They obviously did the audiobook recording, but an audio drama, full cast, and it was actually done in, I believe, either 5 or 6 parts on the BBC, and it was amazing, and it was so funny, and it was so perfect for this kind of story, and it was just so much fun to listen to. And another one that goes back even further, back to the 1970s, when Douglas Adams was coming up with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. His
Mhm.
first stop was not in novel form; it was an audio drama. He
Ah,
was creating an audio drama, and then he was able to take that story and adapt it into a book form, and then adapt that into a television series. And then years later, he was working on a feature film. Passed away before it was released in 2005, but he was doing his part to get that finished, to get that realized. And what was great about it is great about the whole experience of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is that you have so many different iterations of this story, and not one of them can really be considered like canon above all others, because Douglas Adams was the one who was adapting it for this format, and then
right,
adapting it for this format, and then this format. And so that's a wonderful tool that too many people don't realize that we have at our disposal.
right,
And it's something that I truly believe that, it's especially after experience it experiencing it myself. That's how excited I am. I'm just, just
Oh, yeah,
actually got, like, the moment kinda stuck
yeah,
in my head there. But it was one of the most creatively fulfilling experiences I've ever had in my life, having this opportunity to do so. And
that's great. So, just like boiling it down then, it's very much like the radio shows that you hear about when people used to gather around their radio and
exactly.
listen to okay. And so the truth is then is that I have heard of them. I just
Mhm.
didn't know we called them audio drama. And
Yeah.
I did not know that they still existed today. I was
Yeah.
unaware that people were still doing this.
Well,
So then
back in the
yeah,
day, they were just referred to as radio dramas because
okay. Yeah,
that's
because
what they
that's
had.
what you had,
That's
right?
what they had. But now,
Right.
like, you not only have the radio drama via the BBC and other formats, like I know NPR was doing it for quite a while. They're the ones that released the radio dramatizations of Star Wars, the original Star Wars trilogy.
Oh,
Now
okay.
they did the first two, and George Lucas really believed in that format and wanted to support it, and so he gave NPR the rights to put together the audio dramatization of Star Wars for the high price of $1. That was
Wow.
all he asked for the rights. And it became this wonderful nonprofit operation, which is what NPR is.
Right.
And so it was such a goodwill project that Mark Hamill lent his voice to it as Luke Skywalker, and Anthony Daniels returned as C3PO. And but at the same time, what they did, what was so brilliant with this was that the movie itself only comes in at about 2 hours.
Right.
This audio drama, like expands for over 6 hours. Actually, I would say like close to 10. Like it is a vast story, and it's exactly what that original Star Wars was, because
Right.
it was supposed to have that sort of feeling of the old serials from the 1940s. So this is what this is doing. It's presenting a full radio production that could have gone from the 1940s. So it's a wonderful thing, and this format really does need to be used a lot more these days.
So let's talk about that. Why would an author like myself consider the possibility of doing an audio drama?
First of all, because we all want to experience our work done in various formats.
Right.
It has been everyone's dream to either see their work on the big screen or to get a streaming deal with Netflix or Hulu or
Right.
Tubi, Freevee, whatever. Like whoever is willing to basically like look in our direction and say, like let let's go ahead and bring your work to life. That's what we all want.
Right.
It's one thing to have our books in bookstores. Obviously, that's a dream for so many of us. But there are so many people that think that based on where they are in life and where their resources are and where their connections are, that's where it's going to end. It doesn't have to end there, because there are so many people that are out there that are putting these together, and they're always looking out for content. So this is an opportunity for you to maintain control over what you're doing. But at the same time, know that you have to pivot in terms of getting your work adapted to a different medium. And it's a wonderful exercise, I do have to say, because what you do is you're basically giving yourself restrictions, because it's one thing for everyone to just hear an audiobook. You're
Right.
basically just telling the story from beginning to end, and someone is performing it. And if that lucky person is me, fantastic. I love that. But at the same time, that's not something that is going to work for everyone. But having an audio drama, having a condensed version of your story, told with music, with a full cast, with special effect, with, I don't want to say special effects, but sound effects.
Sound effects, right.
It's the closest thing that some people may get to getting their work out there and exposed to a different medium. And it also allows you to really kind of take stock in what is expendable and what's not with your story. And you have the control to decide what you want to do with these stories, and what you want to do with these characters, what you want to do with these different scenarios. There was so much that I had to cut in this when I had the opportunity to do this, because just taking you back really quickly, in 2021, I joined the Clubhouse app.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't know, Clubhouse still is, but its impact isn't felt as much lately. It's the kind of app that kept fixing itself until it broke, basically. And I'm saying that as a fan. I love Clubhouse. I owe so much to Clubhouse, and I owe so much to the Clubhouse communities that are there. And one of those communities was a group called the 529 Club, and that's led by Deborah Wooten. And she has put together just a wonderful community of authors, of voice actors, of musicians, of filmmakers, all different types of storytellers and designers and artists. And just like, it's a rich, vast, wonderful community that anyone would want to be a part of. And there's so many amazing people there that are part of it. And so it was always an opportunity. It was always looked at as like, I got to work with this person. I got to work with this person. I got to work with this person, and just feeling that sort of vibe amongst everyone. It's very contagious. And one of the things that was done was they put together an audio drama. and they performed it live on Clubhouse.
Oh, wow.
And that was just, an amazing experience to hear, because it had everything. It had a full cast, it had sound effects, it had a musical score, it had a full on experience that you could just turn up in your car or at home or something, and just lose yourself into it. If you're driving, don't lose yourself too much. Keep your eyes on the road. But 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 it was great to hear, and just the enthusiasm and the talent behind everyone who was putting it all together. It was a great experience. And so Deborah put it out there that they were looking for new stories to adapt into audio dramas, and I raised my hand, metaphorically. You can't really see me, but like while I'm doing it, but I definitely just threw my hat in that race, and I just said, I have a science fiction series called Excelsior, and I sent them the synopsis. I didn't send them the whole story. I
Right.
just sent them like the synopsis, about 2 pages worth, and they really liked it, and they gave me the go ahead to adapt this book that, when I performed it as an audiobook, it came out to just over 7 hours long. And they said, Deborah and company gave me the directive that this has to tell a beginning, middle, and end in 1 hour. So
Wow.
I had a lot of tightening up to do in
Yeah.
terms of this.
Yeah. So is the script for an audio drama similar in a way as if you were going to be producing a script for a film?
Somewhat.
Okay.
The main thing is that the only kinds of directions that are there, the only kinds of stage or screen directions, are sound effects and music. That's it.
Okay.
And so you have a lot to play with, but at the
Right.
same time, you have to keep on conveying to your audience what is going on. So you have to find ways of saying, okay, let me look under this bed and I'll find this. And then you hear the sound effect of, pulling out a drawer or something.
Right.
And
Right.
so you have to kind of keep them alert of what's going on. But at the same time, you can't just go ahead and say, immediately just start throwing out prose and prose and prose and prose and prose without any sort of dialogue to go with it. Dialogue is the key here.
Right.
Dialogue is what's going to keep everything going, because that's the only thing that they can hear. So they can hear the sound effects, they can hear the dialogue. That's all you got to go on. Everything else, with the musical score, like that is, that's obviously conveying the mood. It's moving the action along, and there's so much that comes with that. But when it comes to presenting it in audio drama format, you have to keep the dialogue going, you have to keep the sound effects going. But at the same time, one thing that I've learned is, don't overload the sound effects, because it can be a little bit of an issue when it comes to, putting all of these together and having to actually like click the button as it's going live. And a lot of people, they'll just go ahead and have recording sessions and do it themselves and go ahead and do the editing afterwards. But there really is something that goes with actually hearing those sound effects as they're going live, while that an audience is listening. Like
Right.
it's an amazing experience.
So where did you come up with the musical score? I had not even considered that. Like, you can't just go out and steal someone's music. So you've got
No, no,
right? Like you yeah,
you gotta make sure
yeah.
that you have someone there to do it. And thankfully,
Okay.
I am not a musician in any sense of the word, but I know what I like. And I know that when I hear someone who actually like presents something that really, grabs my attention, I'm going to do that. And we originally had someone else who was tagged by our people to be the one to do the music score. And when I heard, he basically he was in the process of being commissioned to work on another project, and he was getting paid for that.
Right.
And so this was all strictly voluntary, this whole experience. And so he was basically just saying like, well, here's something that I put together before. Maybe this will work. And it sounded good, but
But it
I
wasn't
also,
what you needed, right?
it wasn't what I needed. And I basically just told him, I said, like, look, it's all good. You have your own project. You go ahead and do that. No harm, no foul. And if something were to come along to bring us together and work on a different project, then via con Dios. But
Right.
but for now, you're good. It's all good. I'll look around elsewhere. And serendipitously, someone who was there to audition originally to be one of the voices reached out to me and offered his services as a musician. And he sent me a couple of samples of works that he had done on short films. And the part that blew my mind, not only was the music really good, but it kind of fit this really cool tone that I was looking for. But what really blew my mind was the fact that the short films that he worked with were for a director named Carl Hansen. And when I reached out to him after this, I said, by the way, would this Carl Hansen that you worked with be the one who's married to Jennifer Eldridge? And he wrote back saying, yeah, that's, that I just recently worked for him on a few projects, working with him on another one as well. I was like, well, it's funny you should say that, because Jen Eldridge is a friend of mine from high school, and she was one of the first people to actually, read these Excelsior stories when I first came up with the character. And so that was just like, okay, now you really have to do it.
Yeah.
So
Now there's no choice, right?
it's like Annette O'Toole auditioning for Smallville and saying, by the
Right.
way, I was in Superman 3. They're like, well, you're going to be in it. So
Yeah.
that's great. So it was that moment. It was my little Annette O'Toole moment, just kind of bringing him in. And he had like this really cool vibe that went with this music. And there's a gentleman named Izzy G. And he, he was just a really awesome person to work with. And I'm so thrilled that he's already excited to work on the next one, to keep
Fantastic.
that same sort of vibe going. And he wound up connecting really, really well with another musician that we had in the whole production, who's Audra Angelique, who's very quickly become a dear, dear friend of mine. And she is just an incredible collaborator as well, because not only was she a great voice for the character that she played, but she also was able to bring her musical stylings to this story as well. And she even wanted to come up with an actual theme song that with lyrics that harken back to like James Bond themes. So it was really, like, it got everyone even more excited. And
Right.
what was a truly wonderful experience after I put the script together, which took several months, and it really was all about, okay, this scene works, this scene doesn't work, this whole intro doesn't work, but if I have my main character just talk about it a little bit in his first opening lines, then that takes care of
That takes
those
care of
pages and
that. Right.
pages. Yeah.
Right.
So it's all about, like, what works and what doesn't. And it was just like, I had these three characters that were looked at as, they were basically set up as body count, but they were part of this whole other world that this other main character was in. And by getting rid of them, that freed up even more space. So it's just like, what works, what doesn't work, what can I do with these characters? Can I tighten these characters together? What if I took this scene and instead of these two characters taking a walk, they're doing something else and making it just more active? And it was
Right.
just like, and instead of this character doing this, I'm going to switch him out, bring in this character, give him more to do. And then it really became a lot of fun when I realized that there were a lot more women that were set to audition than guys. So it was just like, okay, I'll make this one a girl. I'll make this one a girl, and just like,
Right.
made a
It
couple
didn't
of changes there.
change it didn't change the outcome of the story, but you were able to kind of adjust to what you had available to you.
Absolutely. And
So as an author, let's
Mhm.
say that, okay, I've decided I want to do an audio drama. This
Yes.
sounds exciting. The
Yeah.
first thing, of course, is you got to work on your script. You got to decide how long you want your audio drama to be, and then you have
Mhm.
to work your script into that.
Yep.
Then what?
Then you basically just, in my case, I was able to just kind of deliver the script to my people at the 529 Club.
Right.
And they were, I was able to tell them, I said, like, look, I was able to get it down to 80 pages. 60 is the typical for one page
1 hour. Yeah.
equals 1 minute.
Right.
And so I said that, like I got it down to about 80 pages, so technically it's an hour 20, but I feel like, it's so fast paced in the last 20, 30 pages that we kind of like really, we should be able to just kind of squeeze that. We just might make it an hour. And during the rehearsals, just jumping ahead a little bit, just before I jump back, but there was, we realized that we could not possibly speed things up to a point where we can get all of this done in an hour. So Deborah made the wonderful, and I'm so grateful she made this executive decision. She basically said, all right, what if we were to do it over 2 Sundays? And so then it was just like, well, if we do it the 12th and the 19th, then that'll be great. And what we can do is we can take, I can take part 1 and do some quick edits. And if there were any sort of mess ups or anything like that, any technical glitches, I can fix that. And then I can post the edited version of part 1 an hour before, and then we'll just jump right into part 2.
Part 2.
Yeah.
Right.
And that wound up being the way to go. And once I had that freedom, then it became like, well, then I can add this scene and this scene back
Right.
into
Now you
this.
can add things back because
Yeah,
you have a little
exactly.
more space again. Right.
But what's really cool about it was these were all original scenes, but they all expanded the story in itself.
Right.
So they added extra elements to different characters that really didn't have too much to work with before. And we were really we were given an interesting little monkey wrench when one of our main actors had a gig on the day of the first part, and he had a handful of dialogue, not much, but a little bit in part 1. So I basically just kind of added this other scene and just kind of wrote around him. So that way, when he is unveiled at the beginning of part 2, it's more of an event. And
Oh, okay.
so it lent itself to a better feel to it, because we were able to hold him off, but at the same time we were able to talk about him more, and in a
Right.
sense kind of like build up his legend. So that
Right.
way, when part 2 started, he's able to come right out of the gates. But these switches, these different changes around and everything, and these different gender switches that we did, it wound up adding some really awesome elements to the overall story. One of the actors, Erica Harvey, she at first didn't think that she was going to be able to play the part that she wanted playing, but I insisted on her auditioning for it because I knew she would knock it out of the park, and she absolutely did. So I knew it was just like, you are this character. You absolutely have to play this character. And she not only did, but she was amazing in it. She was absolutely amazing.
Does an author need to get a director then? I mean, would that be the easiest way, is getting someone who handles like that part of it? Like you had this group that you went to, or is it something that I could sit down and do by myself, having never done something like this before?
Well, basically what wound up happening was we did several hours worth of auditions, and
Okay.
we got to, I got to hear like different takes on these different characters, which blew my mind because this was the first time that since 1992 that there was going to be another voice for
Right.
this particular character, and for all these characters, because
Right.
they've been in my head for so many years.
Right. Right.
And so getting to hear that alone was worth it all. And everyone did such an amazing job with the auditions that I thought the next step was, okay, now we're going to do the callbacks. But Deborah basically just asked me to just take some time. The two of us sat down, just ourselves, in a clubhouse room, and we went ahead and divvied up everyone. And then all of a sudden it was just like, oh, we have our cast. And there
Yeah.
were a few people that we needed to reach out to in order to, other people had reached out asking to be involved. And it was like, well, you can actually fit this little part here, and you can fit this little part here, and you can fit this part over here. And then wasn't too much longer after that, that's when we had our full cast. And it was an experience that really just kind of blew my mind because Once we set that up, then I asked, okay, so what are we doing directing wise? Who's directing this? And Deborah put the ball in my hands and trusted me with this. I've never done anything like this in terms of directing before. And she said flat out, you know your characters more than anyone. You should be the one to direct this. And the fact that she had that sort of faith in me and trusted me with a project like this, how could I say no? It was
No, I
just like,
wouldn't say no, but I'd be terrified because I'd be thinking
yeah,
like, when do you put in music and when is that, like, I would be very afraid that what I ended up with, I don't think I'd be so worried about the character and the voices and things as much as all of the extra.
yeah.
You
Well,
know,
that was,
I feel like I'm an author. I write things. I don't
yeah.
know what to do with the auditory stuff.
Well,
Right?
the really fun part was I organized one-on-ones with my actors, and I was able to sit down with them just on StreamYard. And
Yeah.
I told them, I gave them about like 10, 15 minutes, and I gave them the character. I told them, like, the backstory of them. I told
Right.
them
Right.
what they're up to, what they're going to wind up doing. I spoiled quite a bit of it for them. But they loved it. They loved hearing more and more and more about it. And so
Well,
that
you
that
gave
had
them
them
the
really,
character that was living in your head.
yeah.
Because
I
as
basically just like,
authors, we
yeah,
have the characters, they're here. They're
yeah,
here in our head. And what's in the story isn't necessarily everything that's in our head.
yeah,
Like, I tell people all the time, I know what my characters are having for breakfast this morning, but I don't necessarily say so in the novel. I just
yeah.
know them well. And so
Hmm.
you offered that, which I think is wonderful for someone who is doing any kind of acting.
Hmm.
This is audio acting, but it's still acting where they have
Yeah.
to become that character.
And it also helped that I do have a theater background.
Okay.
I studied theater in college, and I've written plays before. I've written screenplays before, and nothing's really come of those screenplays yet.
Yes.
It's always been something that I truly loved. Like From Parts Unknown became a video game concept before it became a treatment, before it became many drafts of a script, and then it became a novel, and then it
Right.
became the serial that it is. So
Right.
there are a lot. I'm familiar with a lot of different iterations and a lot of different adaptations of these stories. Um, but when it came to directing it, it was basically just like, can I hear what has been conveyed in my head for so many years? And then it became a matter of what I was, of a phrase that I learned when I was working at the Top of the Rock observation deck in New York City. And that was simply aces in their places. And whoever can provide some really good experience, whoever has like some sort of different experience that they can lend to this production. And then it became like, and after speaking with Audra about this, actually she became like my confidant in so much of this, because I was so confident that I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but she believed in me.
Right.
And she basically said that I don't trust anyone else but you.
Well, it
And so,
sounds to me then like, as an author, if this is something that I want to do, you sit down, you get your screen. Well, I don't even know it's called a screenplay, but you get your script written,
dramatization. Yeah.
dramatization written. You then work on getting a good team together, and
Yes.
you look for people who not only are going to perform well what you're doing, but who also have other various and sundry talents that they can bring to this table. And then there's just a lot of trial and error until you get it figured out as to what you want to do.
Our experience was different. We were performing it live.
Right.
And normally what happens is, there is normally a production team behind what it is that you're doing. So you can provide the script, but then you're handing it off to a team that is well versed in putting these things together.
Right.
And so you have an editor, you have someone with a sound effects library, you
Right.
have voice actors that are all set up, like a roster of them and everything. And they're trying out for different parts and thinking that they can go ahead and convey this part. A lot of people will perform various roles at once, and they'll perform one leading role and then two or three other supporting roles where they just have like different lines and
Right. Right.
come up with different voices. We wanted to incorporate as many people as possible in this, because this was going to be a really good calling card for the 529 Club.
Right.
And it absolutely was, because everyone just stepped up in ways that I could not fathom. And getting everyone's enthusiasm, hearing everyone's enthusiasm, and the kind of job that everyone did, it was just wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful.
All right, authors, if you want to keep this discussion going, head on over to the Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. As a member of this amazing community, you get to meet authors, you get to meet readers, you get to just keep these kinds of discussions going. So that link will be in the show notes. George, if someone wanted to get up with you and talk with you more about audio dramas, more about the how-tos, to find out, more information, how do they get up with you?
You can find me on my website. It's he'sgotit.com, as in by George He's Got It. That's the name of my audio production company. And that's behind all of the audiobooks that I do, the podcasts that I do. And you'll be able to contact me right away. You can find me at george@he'sgotit.com. And it's a topic that I love to talk about. So by all means, please,
Reach on out, right?
feel free to reach out, and feel free to ask me anything.
Super. So all of those links will be in the show notes. So definitely reach out to George. This is a great opportunity to, think about just new ways to get your stories out there. And I want to thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.